Welcome, everyone. This is today's 2023 Selling More Maine Foods webinar series. We're focusing in this series on food and beverage co-manufacturing. My name is Tanya Swain, and I'll be doing this morning's introductions. Today is the first session in the series, and we'll kick off with a presentation on the what, why, and when of co-manufacturing. Selling More Maine Foods is an information and education series for value-add food and beverage producers in Maine. Our first series this year is coordinated by 4 organizations. I work with Maine Food Strategy, which convenes people across the state to work on projects that benefit from state-level collaborative approaches to addressing food system challenges. And I'm going to hand it off now to one of my project partners, Christine.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christine Cummings. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Grocers and Food Producers Association. MGFPA is a membership-based business trade association representing Main Street businesses, including independently owned and operated grocery stores, convenience stores, supermarkets, as well as food and beverage producers, processors, wholesalers, and distributor companies. We are primarily a legislative advocacy organization, and based in Augusta, I spend much of my time at the State House during the legislative session. We work closely with the Department of Ag, Department of Labor, DECD, and others, and serve as a liaison for our members working with the estate and the administration. We are a community dedicated to the prosperity of Maine's grocery and food producer industry through excellence in advocacy, networking, and education. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. We're looking forward to a great presentation, and please reach out if you have any questions. And I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Bill.
Good morning. I'm Bill Soretta, Executive Director of Fork Food Lab in Portland. We are a shared kitchen and food business incubator with currently hosting 60 small food businesses. As many of you know, we are expanding and moving to South Portland in about 2 months to a new rebuilt 30,000 square foot facility that can accommodate roughly 90 businesses. But more importantly for today, we are going to be expanding our capacity to do processing and packaging for our members, and we're going to extend that capacity to other businesses in the greater Portland community, meaning we'll be doing some limited food processing, co-processing, co-packaging for limited scale runs that currently are not handled very well now. And I look forward to all of you joining us for the next 2 beyond this. I think this is going to be a very helpful set of presentations for those of you interested in co-packing, co-processing in Maine. And now I will pass it on to Sue.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sue Hansen, and I'm the Food Accelerator Program Manager at the Maine Center for Entrepreneurs, and that's a mouthful. So MCE for short. So MCE is a 25-year, we've been in business for 25 years. We're a nonprofit organization that works with Maine entrepreneurs across all industries to provide them with the tools and resources they need to successfully build and grow their businesses. And in the last 5 years, we've added 2 food accelerator programs, so focused specifically to work with food and beverage companies, those that are looking to scale up, so take their business to the next level. So they're established food companies and looking for the tools and resources and what they need to really, kind of strengthen their foundation and move their business forward. And another program, that's our cultivator program, and our other program is the market share program that is for more mature companies that are focused on and ready for more aggressive market expansion. And that those programs are funded by Focus Maine, so we're really grateful for our partnership with them. So over the last 5 years, we've worked with over 70 food companies, helping them grow their businesses. And we've worked with an additional 50 to 60 companies over the last 13 years through our Top Gun program, which is for startups across any industry. So if you want to learn more about our programs, you could definitely contact me, and information on MCE is on the website. But I'm really excited today to introduce Ian Pasquarelli and Jess Caven, who are, in addition to owners of companies, are also MCE mentors. So we have at MCE over 250 mentors in our mentor network, and over 65 of those companies have direct food and beverage industry experience. And Jess and Ian are 2 of them, so we're really grateful to have them here. So to introduce Ian Pasquarelli, who is the founder and CEO of the Kitchen Network, which is located in Boston. And don't worry, Ian is a native Mainer from Aroostook County. So he has ties to Maine and loves working with Maine companies. And Jess Caven is the co-founder and principal of Generation CPG, which is located in Maine. So Ian and Jess, I'll hand it over to you for further, talk a little bit more about what you guys do and to take it away. And just to let everyone know, we're talking about this as a presentation, but in talking with Ian and Jess, we really want this to be a discussion as well. So Ian and Jess are going to share a lot of examples over the work that they've done, but then would really love to hear from you. So please put any questions you have in the chat and they'll try to answer them along the way. And if it's better to wait to the end, they'll answer them at the end. So let's take it away, you two.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah, as Sue said, we're happy to, we're here to answer questions mostly. We'll go through our slides and talk about our anecdotes and stories, but really excited to hear what questions you might have and be as helpful as we can. We'll answer what we can in the chat along the way, and then we'll answer more questions at the end of the session. But again, I'm Ian Pasquarelli. It's great to meet everybody. I grew up in Smyrna, Maine, just outside Holton, up in Aroostook County. I'm a graduate from the University of Maine Food Science and Nutrition program. And now I operate the Kitchen Network in Boston. We're an outsourced research and development company. So we do a lot of product development across all categories. And I also co-founded a beverage company and I'm working on a food industry software as a service platform as well. So long history in the food industry in various different aspects, a lot of work in co-manufacturing and co-packing, and excited to meet everybody today and answer any questions. And now I'll pass it over to Jess for her intro.
Thanks so much, Ian. So nice to meet everybody. And I'm Jess Caven. I live in Mid-Coast, Maine, although I'm not originally from here, so don't hold that against me. But I've been in the CPG industry for just about 15 years. I worked in an operations and supply chain capacity directly one-on-one for brands for over a decade. And then I went into consulting about 5 or 6 years ago, and I'm a co-founder of Generation CPG, and we offer consulting services for food, beverage, and wellness companies in the CPG space in operations and supply chain capacity. And what that means is we help with all the way from commercialization and ideation through production and launch and everything in between, which can include sourcing and finding a manufacturing partner, managing that relationship, sourcing ingredients and packaging, putting together COGS, which is cost of goods sold models, and doing margin analysis across various selling channels. We help brands also find 3PL, third-party logistics and fulfillment distribution partners, and then general operations and supply chain. And I do a lot of work in the co-manufacturing space, have been doing it for a long time. I'm really passionate about food. Mostly, I really just enjoy eating it. And so I'm happy and honored to be here today and happy to answer any questions along the way and also after we go through the slides.
Thanks, Jess. Okay, so this is a quick overview. This is a 3-part series. So again, we hope everybody comes back for the second session and the third. We'll be covering a lot more ground and in-depth topics in the next 2 sessions. But today we're going to cover the what, why, and when. So what is it? It can be a bit difficult to define, and it may have a few different definitions out there, but we're going to discuss what is co-manufacturing, what are the details, what does it really entail, why would I co-manufacture, or why would anybody co-manufacture a product, and when, if I am considering it, when do I know that I'm actually going to be ready to co-manufacture, and what factors do I need to consider? So we'll really dig into the details leading up to defining what it is and when should I consider it for my own business. The second session is about more in-depth details of what outsourced manufacturing actually entails. How do you maintain these relationships, which is exactly what they are. They are very much a relationship. This is your business and your baby, and you're potentially handing it off to an outsourced group. So how do you manage that relationship? And then future planning. What goes into planning for growth, and how do you know that this is the right move, and what happens moving forward to continue expanding your business? And then the last session is going to be really in-depth details about co-manufacturing for others. Maybe you're already manufacturing your own food now and you're considering utilizing your excess capacity or equipment or specialized equipment or anything of the sort, or considering you want a bigger facility, but it might not fill your own needs, maybe you can manufacture for others. So there's a lot of details that will go into each of these other two sessions, but we're really excited to get started with this first one, defining what it is and talking about the pros and cons. So what is a co-manufacturer? And actually, Jess, I'm going to let you take this slide.
Okay, sure, no problem. Just to build on what Ian said, so some key takeaways that we hope to cover in this first session is, what is a co-manufacturer, a co-packer? Why would it benefit me to use one? When am I ready to consider outsourcing manufacturing, which could be different for each and every one of you. So we'll run through that specifically. And then the pros and cons of manufacturing, which there are many. So we'll run through that as well. And so you can hop to the next slide. Okay, perfect.
Okay, so, we get this question a lot, and these terms get thrown around in many different ways. You may have heard it as co-manufacturing, contract manufacturing, co-packing, contract packer, all of the above. And at the core, the definition of a co-manufacturer, it's a company or a facility that's contracted to produce or package products for other companies. And so you are outsourcing manufacturing to this contract manufacturer. It can be referred to by many different terms, even though they all essentially refer to this single contracted group that's going to manufacture or package your product. By no means are they a one-stop shop. There's no just group of co-manufacturer that fits the same definition for everything. They all have different specialties. They all do different things. There may even be a difference between contract manufacturing and co-packing. A co-packer may not manufacture anything at all. They may just actually be packaging things. So they have specialized packaging equipment where you bring your fully made product to them in bulk, and then they're actually packaging it into packages that you don't have the equipment for, or your manufacturer doesn't have the equipment for. So although there may be many different terms out there, they all refer to some form of outsourced production company that's going to either finish your product or make it from scratch for you. So we'll dig into the details on each one of those different types over the next few slides. But in general, it is just referring to someone that is contracted to make a product for someone else. You can go ahead and switch to the next one, Sue.
Perfect. And so what types of co-manufacturing are available? So there are multiple different types: full turnkey, tolling or partial service, bulk production only, or packaging only. So we'll run through what those mean. So for full turnkey, that means the co-manufacturer usually sources all of the ingredients and packaging. They manage all of the ingredient and finished product inventory, and the client places orders for finished units, and the co-man sends the bill to the client. So what that means is, if you are manufacturing yourself right now, you're purchasing your raw materials, your ingredients, your packaging, you're putting that all together. In this scenario, the manufacturing partner would do all of that for you. So they would purchase all of your ingredients, all of your packaging from the suppliers. They would manufacture it, and then they would charge back an all-in price to you for those finished products. And when you're having conversations with manufacturers, one of the things that we recommend that you ask is, do you work on a turnkey or tolling model, so that you can understand how that division of labor and pricing will be applied. And for tolling or partial service, this requires more hands-on involvement from the client. Ingredient and packaging is usually handled by the client. Finished products are usually shipped and stored elsewhere. So what that means, as opposed to full turnkey, is that you, the brand, are holding part of the supply chain. You are purchasing the ingredients, you're purchasing the packaging, you are shipping that and coordinating with the manufacturing partner, and then they are charging you a price literally just to manufacture it and then ship it out to another location from there. Bulk production only means that they're producing a finished good, but maybe not in the packaging format that you're looking for. For an example of this, I worked with a brand that was producing a puffed product similar to a Cheeto, and the manufacturing partner didn't have the packaging capabilities that they were looking for their retail ready packaging. So they were purchasing these puffs in bulk, basically totes, and the manufacturer was producing those puffs, and then it was shipping to another facility, which was right down the street, for it to be packaged in form, fill, and seal pouches. And then it went from there to the 3PL. So that would be a bulk production only scenario. And then packaging only is just building on what I just described, which is they only package product. So your product itself is actually produced someplace else, and then it's shipped to this facility that would only package it in the finished packaging. So they would receive bulk product, they might season it. So similar to the example I just gave with the puffs, potentially the manufacturing partner would make unseasoned puffs, then it could go to another facility where they would get seasoned and packaged. And you can go to the next slide, Sue.
And just to follow up on this slide as well, we could probably dig in deeper and give you pros and cons for each one of these concepts. They all have their utility, they all have their fit for certain businesses. But again, what you really want to dig into, is this a good fit? Is this a benefit to me? Is this the right fit for me? Does it really make sense to make a puffed cereal on the West Coast and ship it to the East Coast to get it, coated, sugar coated and packaged? There's a lot of things that go into each one of these scenarios. Happy to answer questions later, but just to let you know, we're happy to dig in deeper if you have more questions about one of these scenarios. So what are the benefits to working with a co-manufacturer? This is a very short list. We could certainly go into a longer one again, but we're going to highlight a few of the things here. And I'm sure some of these will resonate with somebody who's considering co-manufacturing. So, the first one at the top of the list here, it allows you to focus on daily business development versus production management. So if there are any brand owners out there or production managers out there on this call now, you are probably a business owner. You've started this from the ground up. You are managing day-to-day operations. You have been on the floor doing production. You've gotten your hands dirty, but you also know you're in charge of developing your business, selling the product, getting it into retailers, working with brokers, and everything in between. And that becomes a lot on your plate at any given time. And so if you are constantly stuck on the production floor while also having to spend your time on business development and working with all these other angles, it can be really challenging. Your time gets incredibly valuable at this stage, and you need to figure out what is most valuable for your time. And business development for a growing brand is very important. And so this is not necessarily the only moment where you realize, oh, I need to go to co-manufacturing immediately. Maybe it means bringing in additional help or managers or different people to get on the floor. But it may be a point where you realize, okay, we need to maybe consider, we can grow this brand through business development, but we don't necessarily need to be the people that are hands-on making this product. So maybe that's an option where a co-manufacturer can come in, take that production management off your hands, and then you can focus on growing your brand, getting in front of retailers, getting in front of brokers and buyers, and expanding and getting the volume that you need to grow your business. The next line down here, your demand is outgrowing your capacity. It's a very straightforward reason to consider co-manufacturing, right? And this also points to one of the things we like to, anytime somebody asks us, and I'm sure Jess can agree with me here, am I ready for co-manufacturing? One of the first things we want to know is, have you maxed out your capacity? Are you producing just as much as you can with your given equipment and facility and timeline and everything that you can do? Because you want to really push yourself to the limits. And I know it can be frustrating and difficult, and it'll take a lot of your time, but you really want to make sure you're doing as much as you can with what you have now, because that's going to be your most efficient way to produce up until the point where you're considering outsourcing it somewhere else. So once you realize, hey, this demand is just too much, we're producing 6 days a week, I'm spending 70 hours a week on this, I really need to consider another option, then you may be at a point where you've outgrown your capacity and you need to consider somebody else who can help you meet your demand. And that's always the best problem to have, but it can be challenging, and it really presents the issue of outsourcing this to someone else, and what do you need to consider. The next line down, you require cost prohibitive specialized equipment for scaled production. A great example of this is, as Jess just mentioned, a puffed or extruded product. That is not a piece of equipment that somebody just goes out and purchases right away and knows how to operate and can start operating efficiently in their home-based kitchen. It's a very specialized piece of equipment, and so it can be a challenge to start a business that way without having access to that yourself. And so you may have to jump straight to co-manufacturing or a really small-scale operation to get started, and that can be difficult. But there can be a lot of pieces of equipment. It could just be a really large mixer. It could be a really large capacity steam jacketed kettle. It could be a bottle filling line. All of these are really specialized equipment that can be a big challenge up front for an early stage or a solo entrepreneur or a small to mid-sized business to consider a big upfront capital purchase for a specialized piece of equipment, and you may not be able to take that risk. And so, okay, maybe this specialized equipment is what I really need. This is exactly what I need to grow my business. And so that's your reason to reach out and consider, okay, who might have this piece of equipment that can help me either share the cost or can help produce this for me. Again, that leads into the next line as well. You don't have the capital, you don't have the ability to take on a new loan to support expansion yourself. You may think, hey, I want to have my own canning line and I'm ready to do this, but it takes a lot of capital. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of space and square footage to put these things in your own facility. Maybe we want to keep our overhead lower. And so we consider, okay, who has this equipment? Who do we look for to help us expand? Your new retail accounts require you to produce in an SQF facility. This could be any GFSI, which is Global Food Safety Initiative, right? So that's that umbrella food safety level that you may need to reach to go into a retailer. So certain retailers, Costco or Wegmans or any of the bigger retailers may require you to be producing in a certified facility that you're not able to achieve at your own facility. And these high-level food safety certifications can be difficult to achieve for a small to mid-sized company. I've seen it time and time again, where somebody just really, they do everything, you could do everything really well, you could be incredibly safe with the operations and everything you do, but your facility just may not be capable of becoming certified. And even getting the plan in place and doing everything can be cost prohibitive to get it there in the first place. But this is a retail account that you really need and you really want to get into. So again, this may be that point where you say, hey, look, we just can't do it here. We need to find somebody that has this certification so we can get over that hurdle. And then we can get into the retail accounts that we need to grow the business. Same thing with the next line. Your quality assurance or your HACCP or recall policies or any other food safety protocol just can't be handled at your current facility. Then you need to consider finding someone else that can do it and has these things in place. You can jump over that hurdle and get moving, get producing, and get into these new retail accounts. The next line is similar to the first line: business development, marketing, selling, growing your brand. As a business owner, what's most important is volume, right? We're in the CPG game, we're in the volume game. It's important to grow sales and grow pull through and get this product moving on the shelf. The more time you can focus on marketing your product, selling your product, and growing your brand, the better your bottom line is going to be. And if that takes moving your manufacturing to someone else and placing it in someone else's hands, which can be scary and can be worrisome, and there's a lot of factors that go into it, it can be what's more important to make sure that you have the time as the owner or as the business development executive to focus on getting this product out there. And then the last piece is you just don't have the operations, you don't have the help. I mean, labor can be an incredibly difficult thing to find depending on where you're located. And maybe you just don't have the operations to make it happen on your own. Or maybe you yourself just don't have the production expertise, which is totally fine. It's okay to admit that, hey, I don't necessarily know exactly how to scale this product. If you have questions like that, feel free to ask Jess or I anytime, or anybody in the MCE network will get you the answers to the questions you might have. But it's okay if you don't have the expertise. That's what co-manufacturers are great at. They've been doing this for years. They know how to make this product. They know how to make it efficiently, and they have the knowledge and expertise to help get you where you need to go. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask other groups. Jess, do you have anything you want to say before we go to the next slide? Or
No, I think you covered it. Perfect.
Okay. All right.
Great. So how do I know if I'm ready to outsource my manufacturing? This is a big question that I'm sure a lot of you want more information about. And so we've just listed a few things to consider here. And by no means do you need to have all of these things in place, but they're just things to consider as you're thinking about if you're ready or not. So the first thing we listed here is you've maxed out your existing capacity and achieved consistent volume that will justify the minimum requirements for a co-packer. So Ian kind of touched on this, but if you're self-manufacturing right now, are you at capacity? Are you unable to keep up with the demand from your consumers to be able to meet that demand and produce that volume? That's probably the number one reason that I have brands come to me looking to go find a co-manufacturer, is that they just cannot keep up with demand. They have a lot of other things they're managing. They want to be able to sell. They want to be able to manage the behind the scenes for the business, and producing the actual product is time consuming, and they're not able to keep up anymore. So I'd say that's probably the number one reason that I have that I see brands looking to work towards finding a co-manufacturer. The next one is you have a proven formula, production process, and secure supply chain. And the one after that kind of goes hand in hand. You have finished specs and documentation. So when you go out to speak to manufacturing partners, these are some of the questions that they're going to ask you. Do you have a formula? What is your process? Do you have finished product specification sheets and documentation? And what does your supply chain look like? So that's a lot of pieces of information that need to be buttoned up. And you don't have to have all of them, but it's more helpful and will streamline the process and make things faster if you do. So you might be producing your product in your kitchen or a commercial kitchen, and taking that formula and process from there to a manufacturing partner, there will be changes in that process. So it's great to just have a starting point and have as much documentation as possible. How long, each quantity of ingredients, what size is the batch that you're producing? How long are you holding that ingredient at temperature? Do you test the pH or anything like that? The more information that you can provide a manufacturing partner with, the better. Some manufacturing partners have internal R&D departments and others don't. So that's something obviously Ian can touch on and help with as well, if need be. But it's important to have as much information documented as possible. I have had some brands over the course of my career that have come and said, I have this idea, I want to make this product, I don't have a formula, I don't have a process. And that's sort of starting, behind where you kind of need to take a couple steps back before you go approach a manufacturing partner. So those are just some things to consider. And did you have anything you wanted to touch on those two points?
Yeah, just one note that you brought up, which is you may be producing in a commercial kitchen, or you may be producing small scale. You have to be prepared for your formula to likely change. And this can be a very big hurdle for someone who is very close to their product. This is your baby, you've created it, you've sold it, people love it. And then you want to go to a manufacturer, you want to scale up, and it has to change. It has to change for process to make it flow through a piston filler, or to make it mix better, or there are things that have to happen when a product goes to scale, and you have to be prepared that a change might need to happen. And that can be really, really challenging from a product owner perspective. And it's not that the co-manufacturer, doesn't think your product's good, or doesn't think it's good enough, or wants to do this to make it easier for them. It's a give and take. You want it to be as good as it can be, in its best format. But when it comes to scale, things inevitably behave differently. As Jess said, can it hold for 45 minutes without changing the texture? If you're making a small batch, it may sit in somewhere for 10 minutes. In a 500-pound batch, it may have to sit there for 45 minutes as a bottle is getting filled, or as it's getting deposited. And so there's a lot of things to consider. And the number one thing is just be prepared. It may have to change a little bit, and just try to retain an open mind and be aware that things might have to change with scale, and you just have to do your best to roll with it as it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that totally, Ian. And I think just being flexible and open to the conversation is important. And of course, I think understanding what is most important to you for the integrity of your product and your brand, and then having those conversations with the manufacturing partner, seeing what might need to change, and then making decisions from there. So on that note, this next one, you have chosen your desired packaging. There's a little asterisk there. And the reason is because you might think, this is how I want to package my product. But then when you go to a manufacturing partner, they may not have the capabilities to package in that format, or they might not be able to because of the process that is going to be needed to produce your product. So that's another big thing that I see with brands, is that they have an ideal packaging format that they're interested in putting their product in, but then when they go to scale, that's actually not possible. Something else to consider on that front is the sustainability aspect of packaging. And we have a lot of brands that are interested in using compostable packaging, recyclable packaging, and sometimes the manufacturing partners are just not able to work with those formats at this time. I think the packaging industry is not as far ahead as I would like it to be on the sustainability side of things. So for example, compostable packaging exists and it's great and it's getting better. However, it hasn't really moved ahead in terms of being able to protect your product on the shelf life side of things as much as you'd like. So if you were packaging in a traditional form, fill, and seal film packaging that may allow you to have 12 months of shelf life versus compostable, which might only give you 4 months or something like that. So it's a big consideration to think about. And then also compostable and recyclable packaging is more expensive. So that's another thing to consider as well. Moving on from there, the next point we have listed is you have a sales plan in place and an MSRP that is viable. And MSRP is manufactured suggested retail price. And so margin and COGS. I could probably speak for the entire presentation time on COGS, which stands for cost of goods sold. And that's really the foundation for a viable product. If your cost of goods sold does not allow for you to have a margin, which means the percentage that you're going to make when you sell it, then really, how will you be able to be a successful company? So it's very important to understand your cost of goods sold early on. And we help brands with that understanding. For example, I want my product to be organic and I want it to be in compostable packaging. And so we would put together a COGS model for you on that. And you might find that that's going to cost $5 a unit and you're trying to sell it for $6. So that doesn't give you enough margin to be financially successful as you scale. So perhaps you consider doing 70% of your ingredients organic and you start with traditional packaging and then move towards compostable packaging and full 100% organic as you scale and are more financially stable moving forward. The next point is you have a retailer or multiple retailers who are interested in bringing your products into their stores. This is probably the next most common reason that I have brands come to me looking for a manufacturing partner. You're selling at your local independent stores, at your farmer's market, and then somebody approaches you from Whole Foods or another retailer that wants to bring in your product into 40 of their stores, but you can't meet that demand. So that's a reason to consider co-packing manufacturing. And the last point we have listed here is a retailer or distributor requires that your manufacturing facility is certified, GMP, GFSI, SQF, et cetera. So some of the big box retailers require that you're manufacturing in a facility that has these certifications. And it's really important to adhere to that requirement if you're going to be selling into those stores. So that's another reason to consider manufacturing. Ian, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we go to the next slide?
No, I think you covered it. And I just want to, just mention again that each of these points that Jess just mentioned also may include reformulation as well. It could be for shelf life extension. You go into 40 Whole Foods and you've been selling regionally with a 2-week shelf life. You may require a 4 to 6 week or even longer. And that again can possibly change your product or the way it's made. And so, just anytime you're considering expansion and growth and scaling and working with another manufacturer, you have to also consider what are the other factors that might have to change about the product or process. But yeah, that's it. Thanks, Jess.
No problem.
So what are the benefits or pros of working with a co-manufacturer? Again, this is a pretty short list. We could go into many more, but these are the top level ones. So streamlining your supply chain. This is actually can be an incredible benefit for what Jess was just mentioning, your cost of goods model, right? Because you are currently purchasing 50-pound bags of flour or even a pallet of flour for the product you're making. Or just as an example, when you go to a co-manufacturer who is doing this all day long, they may put flour in silos. And so they get a much better purchasing price for this product as a raw ingredient than you could get as a smaller producer. And so when you work with a co-manufacturer, you may have access to the ingredients that they have on hand. They already have salt in-house, they have butter, they have flour, they have palm oil, they have maybe most of the ingredients you're using in your product now that they can purchase in much larger quantities and get much better purchasing prices on, and then pass that savings on to you, which drastically reduces your cost to produce your product. So streamlining your supply chain can be incredibly helpful moving over to this larger manufacturer. That being said, sometimes you have to bring in your own ingredients. That's inevitable. That happens, and it, maybe makes your product a little bit unique, but it can have really big benefits for your bottom line by switching over to your bulk production. Also, you're increasing your volumes, and so you can see a really big efficiency benefit by utilizing those existing ingredients that they already carry in-house. Your ability to focus on business development. This is probably the third or fourth time I've mentioned it in this webinar already, but again, this allows you to focus on growing your business, getting the sales, getting to the retailers you want to get to, and pulls that piece off your plate that you no longer have to worry about, or at least have to worry about a little less than you used to. Higher volume output. Anytime you're going to a co-manufacturer, you're looking to increase your production. You're looking to scale up. Again, it's that volume game. You are producing a lot more of your product than you used to. You are getting a better, more efficient production. You can put out more product for a cheaper price, and you're getting that out there way more than you could ever do in your existing facility or your home kitchen if you're really jumping up from there. Same thing with better efficiencies. That raw material pricing, your output is more efficient, you have less waste, you have cheaper ingredients, and you're getting everything out there for a lower cost of goods made. And then that allows you that larger margin to get out and really increase your margin, increase your profits, and start seeing that forward growth for your company. Certifications, again, sort of repeating what we've already mentioned a few times here. It may be something like kosher certification or gluten-free certification. Some of these challenging to get in a smaller facility, or for instance, a mixed use facility can be very challenging to get certifications. So kosher, if there's any meat or dairy in the facility, in a shared use facility, is going to be incredibly challenging to get a kosher certification. If there has ever been flour that has touched anything in a gluten-free facility, that is incredibly challenging to get a gluten-free certification to produce your product. And so sometimes moving to a manufacturing facility that's specific to your product or specific to an attribute that your product has can be an incredible benefit to you. It really makes it so much simpler. You can put that stamp on your product and you can directly market to the group that you want to market your product to. So it can have incredible value to get into a facility that's made just for your type of product, and it makes it much simpler to put those things on your logo or on your package and get it out there. Lastly, we have quality control. So quality control is a huge piece here. When it comes to a co-manufacturer, again, this is a facility that is specifically built for doing usually pretty specific processes. They're baking something, they're extruding something, they are a beverage facility, they're a hot fill facility. They get really good at doing that when they're doing that every single day. And they know what to look out for. They know what parameters to adhere to. They know what products how they should behave. They know what's going to make it more efficient and produce less waste. And so quality control can be really, really a big saver when you move up to a larger production, because you are not having these batches that don't perform well. You have more consistent equipment that can heat more accurately. You have more accurate readings and different things that may be qualitative and evaluation tools along the way. And so that can be a major benefit that you don't necessarily notice at the smaller scale. But once you go up to larger scale, it can really have a big impact on your bottom line. And then lastly, of course, the HACCP plans, the SQF, the things that you no longer have to worry about. You don't have to adhere to your own food safety plan anymore. You don't have to keep all those documents updated. That is handled in-house by the manufacturer. So they're handling all of the quality, all the logs, all of the equipment maintenance, all of the cleaning and sanitation gets handled by somebody else now, and that can be a really big help. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are doing manufacturing themselves now that understand the burden that comes off them once they hand that off to somebody else. And so, again, short list of benefits here. We know there's a lot more to discuss. Happy to dig into this more later. But yeah, anything else, Jess, or you want to jump to the next one?
The next slide would be great.
Ian, can I just, and Jess, can I just interject here just a little bit? But I do know that, working for bigger companies, and it could be even, not huge brands, but, more established, sometimes use co-manufacturers for for new product extensions. So I think it's important to note that it could be that, hey, we want to launch a new product line. We are going to produce our core products in our facility, but we want to co-manufacture with somebody else for something else. So for instance, you mentioned gluten-free. So if I'm making something that's breaded, or I'm making breads, but I want to do a gluten-free bread, I may not invest in that in my own facility. I may co-pack that product line, or co-manufacture that product line with someone else. So I think it's important to know it doesn't have to be all 100% one or the other, right? Co-manufacturers allow you that opportunity of, hey, I don't want to invest in all of that in my current facility. I'm going to send that off somewhere else, or I'm going to test those products and make sure that they're going to take off in a co-manufacturer. And if they do, then maybe I'll bring it in and invest. So I think it's important to note that larger food producers, like I know Tyson, produces themselves in their own facilities, but also co-manufacture for those reasons.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very common for larger companies. And, for example, Tyson has multiple plants all over the place, and some of those plants might only have one specific capability. And to your point, Sue, they might want to come out with something else, maybe like a gluten-free chicken breadstick or something like that. And they don't have that capability in-house. So finding co-manufacturer, and it absolutely does not have to be one or the other.
Yeah, it's a great point. It may apply to, simply allergens. You want to have a SKU with nuts in it, but you don't want to bring them into your facility. You push that one SKU out to somebody else that can do it and do it well, and that would be a great opportunity. You also may see sort of the opposite version of the way you explained it, Sue, which is you want to do new SKUs. You want to create new things, but your line time is tied up with producing this one SKU that sells all the time. Push that one out. Maybe it's time to set that one free and move it on to somebody else. That allows you the time in your own facility to then start spinning up new SKUs and trying new flavors, testing them out in a smaller market until you're ready to push them out somewhere else. So yeah, great point, Sue. Thank you.
Perfect. And, for the opposite side of the pros, we have the challenges and the cons of working with the co-manufacturer. And none of these are meant to scare anyone, but just things to consider as you're having conversations and thinking about if you want to work with a new manufacturing partner. So the first point we have outlined here is outsourced and less control. And for me, sometimes what that means is if you're self-producing and have been self-producing, you have full transparency into everything in your supply chain. You know when you're ordering, you know the cost, you know the suppliers. And then if you go to a manufacturing partner who's turnkey, which we touched on at the beginning, which means they're purchasing everything on your behalf and then just charging you an all-in price, you may not have transparency into what they're paying for some of those raw materials. You might not be able to develop relationships with the suppliers that they're using. I always like to recommend that you at least ask the manufacturing partner if they're willing to share activity-based pricing with you, which means that if they're charging you $2 all in to produce your product, they're also providing you with a breakdown of what that $2 is made up of. So the flour costs X, it comes from here. The sugar costs this, it comes from here. We're getting the packaging from here. Sometimes manufacturing partners are willing to share that information, and sometimes they're not. So it's just something to consider when you're having these conversations. Scheduling and timing is another thing. So when you're self-producing, if you have full control over how much and when you produce. And when you go to a manufacturing partner, that will not be the case. They have a schedule, they have a calendar, they have other customers that they're producing for. So you will need to be flexible there and really work to plan your production according to what your estimated demand and sales will be. So I can't stress enough proper planning and communication with the manufacturing partner. You really want to outline the next 12 months. And I know that's very hard, that it's all just an estimate and guessing when you don't have historical sales, but you want to try to have your best guess on paper, share that with the manufacturing partner. And then if you have more information that's more solid, you can share that quarterly. So quarterly sales plan and cut purchase orders accordingly. So I think that's something to consider as well. Quality control, which Ian already touched on. So you could go to work with a partner, with a manufacturing partner, and they have all of the quality certifications in place that you're looking for. However, that doesn't always mean that they adhere to them. So I have seen many times that, I will walk into a manufacturing facility and see things, maybe it's not particularly clean, or somebody's not wearing gloves, or somebody is eating while they're cooking something. And so these are things to just watch out for. So you want to do your due diligence when you're talking to manufacturing partners. You want to ask for copies of their certifications. If possible, you want to visit the facility, walk around, meet the people that will be producing your products, look at the facility, and kind of understand how they manage their quality control. Ian, did you have anything you wanted to touch on that?
Yeah, no, just a huge point, Jess, and you only scratch the surface, and we're going to dig into it more in the next session, actually, because that's going to be a lot. We're going to go into depth about how you vet a manufacturer, what you do during a visit, how important it is to consider the different quality control options. Not all co-manufacturers are created equally, and we'll discuss a lot more of this in the next session. But just a great point, and certainly a lot more to go into on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that front, quality control also means like the finished product. So you might purchase from them, you have the product, you receive it, and then you realize, oh, like all of these bags aren't sealed properly, or there might be something that was contaminated in there by accident. And so as you produce, making sure that that quality is consistent over time. Are there going to be things that pop up, accidentally from time to time? Potentially, but making sure that that quality control is really consistent and at a high level is very critical. So cost and pricing is another important thing to consider when you're looking to work with a manufacturing partner. What are they going to charge you? How is your pricing model going to change? What was your cost of goods when you were self-manufacturing versus what is it now when you're working with a co-manufacturer? So really looking at those numbers and analyzing and making sure that it makes sense for your business to move forward. And then this next point, Ian really drove this home, but your formulas are likely to change. So just something to consider. And again, that doesn't mean that the manufacturing partner wants to change the integrity of your formulation and what you're trying to produce. It just means that there may need to be small tweaks that they do in order to run their product, on your line, your product on their manufacturing line, and also considering shelf life, safety, all of those things. And then minimum order quantities, or MOQ. This is a big one. When you're self-producing, you might be producing, at a small scale. Maybe you're making 100 units or 500 units, and then you speak to a manufacturing partner and they tell you you have to produce 10,000 units at a minimum in order to work with us. So that's something to consider. And to Ian's earlier point, really trying to max out your capacity before you get to the point where you're moving to that manufacturing partner so that you can meet that minimum order requirement. And there are manufacturing partners of all sizes, small, medium, and large across the country. So it's important to have conversations with them and ask them what they require for your production, each production per SKU, per run. And then the last point we have here is inventory management and control. If you are working with a turnkey partner who is purchasing all of the raw materials on your behalf, you may have less transparency into the inventory that they have on hand at any given time. I experienced this with a very large multi-billion-dollar manufacturing group. I was working with them on behalf of a brand, and you would think that they had their inventory control buttoned up. However, that was not the case. Their procurement person, I had to really micromanage them, because we would cut a purchase order for production. We would get to the production date and they would say, oh, we're missing the salt for the production run. And we would say, what do you mean you're missing the salt? We were planned to produce, today. And so kind of having to micromanage that. So it's something to think about, and you might learn more about that through the process of working with a manufacturing partner, but it's important to understand how they manage inventory and if they're going to allow for transparency into the inventory for you. And also post-production inventory reports. That's a big complaint that I see a lot from brands, is that they work with a manufacturing partner and then post-production they don't receive inventory reports from them, and you kind of have to chase them. And so it's another thing to consider.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say each one of these these things in the pros and cons list that Jess and I just went through. This is all going to flow very strongly into the next session around, we discuss, okay, what does a working relationship actually look like? What are the things to look out for? How do I vet a manufacturing facility? How do I make sure this is the one for me? And, or, you know, once I'm working with someone, when do I know when's the time to move or consider somebody else? And so these are constant issues. We see them all the time. We work with a lot of different brands and a lot of different categories. And, you know, there are really good relationships and there are really good manufacturers out there. And there are some that are not so good, or maybe they're just not the best fit. And so it's like we said earlier, it's not a one-stop shop. There's not a one-size-fits-all group out there. It can always be a challenge, but you know, there's certainly a lot of opportunities out there to help you scale up. But that's it for the slides for now. I'm sure there's plenty of questions. I see some good questions in the chat here. Sue, how do you want to run through the questions? Do you want to pick some out and send them to us, or do you want us just to roll through what we see?
Go ahead, Ian, if you're comfortable. I think roll through what you see, because you know you might find a natural progression of the questions and how they come together. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you could come up. Is that okay with everybody? I see everybody on my screen, but I think it's best to do it via chat, and then you know, just kind of reading the question and then answering it.
Perfect. Yeah, I see the first question here from Elena. Is there a way to access a list of manufacturers who focus on offering sustainable packaging options to their clients? As much as I would like to say yes, I think the short answer is no. You know, first of all, there's different packaging formats across many different manufacturing facilities. So there's not like a one-stop list that would show that information. However, I think there are creative ways that you can find that information out. One of which would be going to sustainable packaging providers and saying, this is the sustainable packaging format that I'm looking to put my product in. Do you know of any manufacturers that are working with this? And their answer is going to be yes. And they will be able to tell you that information, and or reaching out to manufacturing partners that can produce the type of product that you're looking to make and asking them, do you have sustainable packaging options available? And they may say yes or no. But unfortunately, I don't know of a list at this time. If that comes up in the future, I can definitely share that back to the group.
And just one note on that too, from the co-manufacturer side of things, just from experience, most co-manufacturers, especially with a new relationship, are going to want to start out on a foot that's going to be as successful as possible. So they're going to want to make a product and package a product in something that they know works. So when they're bringing in a new brand or a new product, going to be a little bit hesitant to also bring in a new type of package or a new film and be putting a new product in a new film, because it's their liability on the line as well. They want to make sure they're producing a high quality product that performs well and gets the shelf life and everything as expected. And so the more variables that come in as a new product to a new facility makes them a bit hesitant, and rightfully so. They want to make sure they're putting out a good quality product. And so, you know, they may be a bit hesitant to bring in this brand new film that they're not familiar with. And so they may try to push you towards something a bit more traditional. And maybe they say, hey, look, we're not going to start with that, but we're willing to test it out as we go. And maybe it's something we can implement later.
Perfect. Ian, do you want to take the next question there from
Sure.
Dick on the GMP?
Sure. Yeah, we threw out a lot of acronyms. Sorry about that. It happens in the industry. So the overarching GFSI is a Global Food Safety Initiative. This is an internationally recognized level of food safety certification. Within GFSI are different acronyms like SQF, BRC, oh geez, there's the one with all the numbers, and I'm forgetting it right now, but there's I think 4 certifications within that are internationally recognized certification acronyms that you can achieve. SQF is a really common one. BRC is a really common one here in the United States. And what these mean is it's a food safety plan that you implement at your facility, which is not only a plan of operations and sanitation and how things operate, but also there's quite a bit of infrastructure and facilities requirements that go along with that. So it can be pretty challenging both from a financial perspective, but also just, physical facility perspective to actually implement that in your facility. And you may require moving to a facility that's specifically built to meet those requirements. And so it can be a big challenge to retrofit a facility to meet those levels of certification. And sometimes it may not justify the expense that needs to go into it in your facility. Then, maybe that's what makes sense to move somewhere else. So GMP means good manufacturing practices. That's a lower level certification that just shows you know the standards on good manufacturing practices, which is standards for sanitation, standards for operation, standards for how you vet ingredients for incoming ingredients and outgoing product. It is a lower level of oversight that goes into just achieving GMP. Whereas, so say GMP would be down low, say your state audit would be the bottom, right? That's your wholesaling license, where the state comes in, they audit you, they give you the approval. GMP is sort of side by side. They are pretty similar. GMP and a state audit are roughly similar guidelines. Up from there, you have supplier assurance audits, which are a bit more intense. And then beyond that, you have your higher level food safety certifications, such as your SQF and BRC and other GFSI level certifications. Again, threw out a lot of acronyms there. I'm happy to answer that question offline in more depth.
I guess really, my question was more about the what are the words behind it. I work in the my real job that's paying for my new business is in the pharma industry, so I know all about acronyms. What are the words behind them?
GMP is good manufacturing
GMP,
practices.
In clinical, we have GCP, good clinical practice.
Sure. GFSI is a global food safety initiative. Again, that's the umbrella certification window. SQF stands for safe quality food. So again, that the words behind those acronyms are less important than what they stand for, really. So sorry if they're confusing. Again, happy to answer those questions offline in more detail.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, it's really those certifications are important based upon where you want to sell your product. So you may just be selling, at your local independent retailers and direct to consumer, which is D2C. And in that case, those certifications might not be required, or they might not be as important to you. And there's lots of small to medium manufacturing partners in the United States that don't have those certifications. And it doesn't mean that they don't have quality programs in place. It just means that they're not at that level. And then if you're going to be selling big box retail, those retailers may require that you produce in a facility that carries those certifications. So it's an important question to ask the retailers. Do you have any certifications that you require for my manufacturing facility? And that will help to dictate where you could produce.
And again, something we'll dig into in the next session too is, am I willing to give one of these up to go to a manufacturing facility where I can hit the volume I need to make to get this product out there? Weighing the cost benefit analysis of, is it that important to have vegan on my label, or is it more important to go to this facility where I can't achieve vegan certification, but I can make 10 times the amount and drop my cost of goods down to where I need to be to meet my margins? A lot of things to consider. And again, we're happy to dig into that more in the next session.
Absolutely. Let's look at some of these next questions here. I see the next question from Kays is, as a young company with a great shelf life product, one of the challenges I found is finding a co-packer that can help small companies. Typically, the conversation starts with, we support small companies. Then I visit, sign the NDA, and don't hear back on pricing. It has been a challenge to follow up. This is unfortunately the world that I live in mostly. And you have to sort of chase them. Unfortunately, it's just kind of the nature of it. A lot of the manufacturing partners out there have really suffered over the last couple of years with a labor shortage. So because you don't hear back doesn't mean that they're not interested, but I would just be consistent. If you've reached out multiple times, you have an NDA, you've visited the facility and you don't hear back, generally, I feel like that's not a good sign. I think responsiveness can be a red flag. If you've shown interest, you've gone that far, and then you don't hear back, I think it can be a red flag. So I totally empathize with your frustration, and I have been there many times, but I would just encourage you not to be discouraged and to keep trying. And if they don't get back to you, just to look elsewhere to other partners.
Yeah, as Jess said, we've seen this. We hear you and we empathize with you. We understand. And there are also some other factors that come into it on the side of the producer as well, where make sure you have your ducks in a row, have your those things we mentioned, have your formula ready, have your expected volumes, even if it's a total shot in the wind that you have no idea what your next year is going to look like. Have a number. Have these things prepared, because there is a series of questions that manufacturers will ask you when you ask them to, are you a good fit? And you want to have those things buttoned up so that you can succinctly answer them. And that may sort of, even a single answer to one of those questions may sort of get you over the hump of, okay, they're a serious producer. We will have a serious conversation with them. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean they'll answer you. You have to stay on top of them. Jess was totally right there. It's that we see it over and over again.
Yep. Okay, the next question here I see is, are margins different for using co-manufacturers versus in-house production? Is there an industry standard rule of thumb for average or minimum margin for food products when produced by co-manufacturers? This is a great question. And Sue, maybe we're going to have a whole entire presentation about cost of goods sold and margins. And I'll just say quickly, because I know we're short on time, if anybody has any questions that I can answer, you're welcome to email me after this, and I'm happy to provide follow-up information if we don't touch on anything. But yes, the short answer is margins are different from manufacturing in-house to working with the co-manufacturer, but they could be positive or negative. It could swing in your favor. And is there an industry standard rule of thumb or average minimum margin for food products? So I would say my perspective, which might be different from other people's, is that you want to be in the 40 to 70% range. It's a big range there, but again, it really depends and is nuanced on where you're going to sell your product and what your overall business strategy is. But that would be my rule of thumb, between 40 and 70%. So that would mean if you're selling your product for $1, that means that you will be making and bringing home between 40 and 70 cents on every unit that you sell. That's important, and especially if you're starting, selling independently, and then you go to retail, and let's say that you only have a 30% margin. As you go to retail, they're going to take a larger portion of your margin, and then your margin will be reduced even further. So it's really important to understand what your long-term plan is and act accordingly on cost of goods and margin.
Yeah, that long-term is the real key here. You may have a great margin with your direct-to-consumer or your small-scale production. You're selling in a few stores, you're producing yourself, and then you decide, hey, we're going to move up to co-manufacturing. You may see a drop in margin, but that long-term plan at year 3, when you are producing millions of units with this co-manufacturing partner, where you can actually get to the volume where purchasing your packaging and your ingredients actually starts to get you the cost efficiencies you're looking for. Although you may see a drop in your margin moving to the co-manufacturer, as long as you have that long-term growth plan to hit the volumes you need, you may be able to hit those margins, not in year 1, but maybe year 2 or year 3. And that's the real goal at the end of the day. There's so much to consider. As Jess said, I think we're already talking through the next webinar of what we need to discuss on cost of goods sold. So we could go into a lot more detail, but yeah, it's really tons of nuance to how you discuss what your margins are and how to get to where you need to be.
Absolutely. And this next question from Barry: with a new emerging brand, typically the co-man requires unusually high MOQs, which is minimum order quantity. How best to negotiate the MOQs at the outset of the relationship? This is a great question. Pre-pandemic, I would say there was a lot of more negotiating power on the side of the brands with manufacturing partners. I have seen that less and less over the last couple of years because of labor shortages, of the supply chain crisis. So it's been harder to negotiate MOQs in the last couple of years. So it never hurts to ask. I mean, I would, this goes back to really developing that relationship with your manufacturing partner and just being honest with them. Maybe the MOQ is 1,000 gallons of, per production run, but you only want to run 500. Just asking them, listen, I will be able to hit that 1,000-gallon MOQ in 3 months, but for the first 3 months, would I be able to run 500 gallons, and see if they're willing to do that. And if you're open with them and present your long-term plan, you have a better chance of being able to successfully negotiate. So I think it never hurts to ask. And then if you are unable to meet that MOQ, then either continuing to produce, self-produce, or potentially, depending on the type of the product, there are smaller manufacturing partners that could be a bridge interim solution between producing yourself and going to a larger manufacturing partner.
Yep. All great points. Again, a great question that we can definitely dig into in the next session as well. This is a lot to do with what a relationship with a co-manufacturer actually looks like. At the end of the day, you are signing a contract, and how that contract is formed happens in your negotiations. So everything is a negotiation, and it can be really uncomfortable to negotiate. It can be really difficult to put together a contract with someone. But that's what we're going to dig into the next session, is how this is actually a partnership, right? You want to partner with this group to help you make your product. The less transactional it can be, the more invested both groups are in the success of the product, because the co-manufacturer wants you to be making more. That means more business for them. And so the more you can work together and find ways to collaboratively build your business and get to the volumes that make sense for the co-man and also make sense for you, then that's the ideal situation. And so every situation is going to be different. And again, next session, we're happy to dig into this in more detail around how you discuss those partnerships, how you negotiate, and what are the factors you need to consider to build that relationship.
Perfect. And this next question from Erica, regarding the proprietary nature of some formulations, what does an NDA do exactly to protect the creator of the product? Are there additional legal protections to consider? So first and foremost, I'm not a lawyer, so I would always recommend speaking to somebody who is a lawyer, or getting some formal legal advice. However, NDAs are really a formality to just protect the information that you share between yourself and the manufacturing partner. In general, that should mean that they keep what you share with them private. However, does that always happen? No. So if you have something that's incredibly unique, I would really advise that you sort of keep that close to your chest until it's absolutely necessary to share it. And I would also advise on getting some legal advice there if you have something incredibly proprietary before sharing that. I don't know, Ian, if you had anything else you wanted to add to that.
Totally agree. I mean, there's a lot of, the way you enter into initial conversations, the way these conversations go, as Jess said, keep it close to your chest as long as possible. They're going to need to know some things, right? Is our equipment actually feasible or the right fit for your product? And there are ways to discuss the generalities around how a product is made, or what are some of the ingredients that go into it. But it's always a bit of a dance in the beginning until you really find that group you're comfortable with. And then, of course, you have to share certain amounts. I've seen some groups go as far, and it really depends on the product, but sometimes you can have perhaps a dry blend made somewhere, and that dry blend gets shipped as an ingredient to your co-man, which then, as part of the process, gets dumped in bag by bag to mix. And so they don't necessarily have the full formulation for how your product is made. That is a bit of an extreme to keep it close to your chest, but at the end of the day, it's a solution. So, we've seen it happen. There are different ways you can approach it. But at the end, the core of the question, does an NDA totally restrict somebody from doing something? Probably not, but it's always good to get it in place and have that paperwork in place. And as Jess said, it's always best to consult legal counsel if you're really concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. This next question is from Alicia. Alicia, I'm not sure if you're still on. I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but you said, what about seasonal products? Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, most of my products is sold seasonally, meaning I'm busier. It's a baked good.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wiped out this year, October, November, December.
Yeah.
But will they help you? Do you need to have that huge amount year round? Or
no.
Can you have it done just October, November, December, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you're producing your product only, once a year or twice a year at a certain volume, you do not need to have consistent production across the year. It's just something to speak to directly with the potential manufacturing partner, because some will be okay with that and some won't. Some manufacturers have MOQs, minimum order quantities for each production run, and then others have ones that are annual volume commitments. So whether you split that across running once or 10 times, it really doesn't matter. So just having that conversation, but you would definitely be able to find someone that could run a seasonal product for you. Perfect. Next question from Vishal. Want to know about shelf life, how we can increase, how we can say that the product is good for 2 months, et cetera. Is there any process or machine for this? Ian, you want to take that?
Sure. Yeah. And again, there's no one size fits all. Depends on the product, depends on the packaging, depends on what the ingredients are, how it's stored, how it's transported. A lot of different factors go into shelf life. Happy to follow up this offline. If you want to shoot me an email, my contact information should be available, and we can certainly dig into this in more detail. There's at the end of the day, a lot of factors go into affecting shelf life. So no real silver bullet there.
And just so everyone knows, what we'll do is on the slides, we will add in Jess and Ian's bio section, which is at the end of the presentation, we'll put their email addresses in there. So then everybody has that, and Tanya's going to send an email out or through the Selling More Maine Foods email group, and you'll get, a link to the slides and the recording if that works for you, Ian and Jess.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. And then next question here. Let's see. Do you have any, from Allison, do you have any pricing formulas or strategies that you can share from broker to distributor to wholesaler to retailer? Yes, we can. I would say, Allison, if you want to email me and I can share some of that information after the call. It's very nuanced, but I'm happy to help and pass along some basic information that can help on that front.
Jess and Ian, just flagging us on time really quickly.
Sure.
We're right about at time. I don't know if you both can stay on a little longer, if other folks want to stay on, or what's your schedules like this morning?
I see two more questions. The first one I can answer really quickly.
Okay, great.
Beverage nutrition fact panel. There are, labs out there that can do these for you. That's a group that, our company does it. Universities do it. There's a lot of different entities that can make a nutrition facts panel for you. Happy to provide a list of resources for people you can reach out to do that. And then the last one, making the transition from in-house to co-packer. And, in the resulting changes, any words of wisdom communicating these changes to your existing customers. It's always a difficult transition. Ideally, you won't really have to communicate it to a consumer. I think the best way to do it is just sort of to mention maybe on your website or on your social media or on your packaging. I don't think you necessarily need to call out that you've changed manufacturers and it changed your product. Maybe discuss, hey, we're embarking on a new growth platform, and we've decided to make these great changes for our product so that we can get it to more people. That's one example. I think there are different ways you can word it. But at the end of the day, consumers really value transparency nowadays. And so whatever you can do to communicate to them via your social or your website or farmers market, however you're speaking with them, find a way to discuss how you're making your product better, or you're growing the business, or you're doing what you need to do to get this product out to more consumers. And the more transparency, a lot of people really appreciate that nowadays.
Yeah. And I see one last question here from Mark. Can you share a list of co-manufacturing companies? We have some resources that are lists that we were planning to share in the next session. And Sue, I'm not sure if you can share that with them, with the group in some format now. And if not, feel free to email me and I can share those with you, no problem.
Yeah, we can take those with the links that you guys have on that slide and put it in a document and load it to our website with the other materials.
Perfect.
Great.
And then Ian, if you want to do the same with, if you some of those lists, we can do the same.
Sure.
If you want to do that or not. Okay, so that's good. So thank you, everybody. Great. That was awesome. Great conversation. So Tanya, I'll let you take it from here.
Great. Thanks so much, Jess and Ian. Great information. We hope to see many of you at next week's session, Wednesday, same time frame. We'll be focusing on outsourced manufacturing relationships and future planning. And as Sue noted earlier, you'll be receiving a follow-up email with links to videos and materials and an evaluation form. We appreciate your feedback if you get a chance to do that. Thanks and have a great morning.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.